Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you for watching. We're so excited to be able to bring this word to you today. This is something that we've been kind of leaking and talking about several weeks. I love the book of Nehemiah, and there's so much that we can gain from him. He is the ultimate leader, the ultimate servant. He is Christ-like.
Yes.
And he gives us so much wisdom. So if you have your Bible, turn to the book of Nehemiah. The name Nehemiah, and first, welcome if you're coming on, and help us spread this word. Hey, Charlie. We are going to be talking about Nehemiah. He is a great man of God, and he has so much wisdom, and there's so much that we can learn. So as we're talking, talk back to us.
Yes,
hit that
please.
little arrow to spread this message across the nations. So the name Nehemiah means Yahweh comforts. And I just think that is so awesome.
That is.
So, and that's God's message. God is trying to tell us that he is our comforter.
Yes, he is.
So Nehemiah, I'm going to give you some attributes of him, of his character. He was compassionate. He was full of cooperation with other people to make God's plan come to pass. He was confident, and he drew that confidence because he was steadfast in prayer.
Yes, he was an intercessor.
Yes, and so he was full of confidence because he knew that God told him what to do, and he knew that if God said it, that he would do it.
Exactly.
He was courageous because of that. So that comes, as part of being confident. And then he was not compromising.
Nope.
Hey, baby girl. My
Good
daughter's
morning.
on here.
Oh my word, I have it on Do Not Disturb. Sorry about that.
Okay. All right. So, and then I'm going to talk to you about how Christ is revealed through Nehemiah. He called the people to remember the law just like Jesus did. Jesus was telling everybody and spreading God's message. And so was Nehemiah. Because he was a courageous leader, that is Christ revealed through him. And Jesus encouraged the people, so did Nehemiah.
Yes.
To do his work and to endure. And Jesus talks about that in John 15. And then he was a prayer warrior, just like what we were talking about. Hey, baby girl. And Jesus was a prayer warrior. He prayed for himself. He prayed for his disciples. He prayed for the believers. And he prayed for all of the people. And so did Nehemiah.
Yes.
And then he was dedicated to God's law. So those are the things I wanted to tell you first as we start off about Nehemiah. And so the book of Nehemiah takes place around, it was written 446 BC. It takes place in 446 BC. It was written around 423 BC. And it's in December, so it's cold, it's winter. It's in Persia, which is southwestern area of present-day Iran. So I just kind of want you to get an idea.
Yes.
We talked about Esther a few weeks ago. This is that area, the same area.
Yep.
So we're going to just break down Nehemiah. We're just going to take it, a couple of verses step by step. We're primarily going to concentrate on chapters 1 and 2. So in Nehemiah 1 through 6. The word of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah, it came to pass in the month of Chislev in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan, the citadel. Now, first, I want to tell you, God is a God of details.
Very much so.
This is a history book. It is real. These events actually happened, and he proves it to us all these years, 465 BC. That's thousands of years ago, and he wanted us to know that this took place, and it was accurate, and it was detailed, and it's factual.
And he wants to give us those little tidbits so then we actually dig deeper and research and learn more about what we're reading.
Right.
We have to be diligent in studying God's word and actually picking out the little words. And nobody would have usually known that was Iran, or you know what I'm saying. He leaves.
I didn't know that. I had to look at it.
It's little bitty nuggets,
right? Because he wants us to know that we can trust him.
Yes.
So this is we're on just verse 1. He just wants us to know that we can trust his word.
Yes.
Okay. So that Hananiah, one of my brethren, so a family member, Hananiah, came with men from Judah.
Yes.
And I asked them immediately. He sees them. He asks them concerning the Jews who had escaped, who had survived the captivity and concerning Jerusalem, because they had been devoured by the enemy and spread, and their city was in ruins, and he was concerned. Immediately he sees his people. He's like, I want to know, how are they and how's the city?
Yes.
And they came to me and said, the survivors who are left from the captivity in the province are there in great distress and reproach. And that word reproach means shame and disgrace. So the wall of Jerusalem is also broken down, and its gates are burned with fire. And so in verse 4, so it was when I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for many days. He was like thrown back.
Yes.
He was like, the breath was knocked out of him. He was taken back. Like, it hurt him to the core that this happened. And then it says, and continues and says, I was fasting and praying before the God of heaven. So let's stop right there. So in 4 verses, we know that God is true, that he wants us to know that he is our comforter, that his events in the Bible are accurate.
Yes.
You can look things up. There's his history behind it. There's proof that they existed, that this king was in place, that Nehemiah was in place, all of it. There's proof in it. And then he was a man of honor and integrity and compassion, and his people were in great distress, and it knocked him to his core. He had to sit down. Like, it knocked him down. That he couldn't even stand.
And also, he didn't take matters in his own hands. He didn't try to control the situation. He didn't jump before the gun. You know what I'm saying? He didn't jump.
Well, right now, he's just taken aback.
Yes,
and
because
he's mourning.
It impressed on him so much grief and heart, because when you're an intercessor, you know, like, your heart, you feel what God, you know, like, your heart breaks for what breaks God's heart. So that was really just put on him, and what does he do?
So an intercessor means someone who prays for other people. And so he is that type of person. He was a prayer warrior. He just he was always communing and talking with God.
Yes.
That's what that means. And so he immediately wept and he was mournful, because he knew that God was hurting, because these are his chosen people.
Right.
And he was affected because they're his people. And so he began fasting and praying. It means seeking after God and, like, what is your will, God? What is going on here? And he was probably asking, what can I do?
Right.
We don't know.
How are you going to use me?
We don't know what he said, but it does show in verses 5 and 6 and 7 that he prayed a prayer. And I'm not going to pray that I'm not going to read it right now. But what I want you to see is, well, in verse 7, it starts off with, we have acted very corruptly against you. He identifies with the people. It's not just like, oh, it's me against them. I'm righteous and I'm a good person and I'm bothered by this, but they have acted poorly against you and they have done something bad and they're terrible, so just forgive them. No. He identified with the people, and he said, God, help us.
Yes.
We have acted poorly. We have sinned against you. We have done wrong. Help us. And then he reminds God about what God said about his people.
Yes.
And in verse 10 he says, now these are your servants and your people whom you have redeemed by your great power and by your strong hand. So he's reminding him, and the word redeemed means to be purchased back. It means to preserve, to rescue. He's like, these are your people that you have claimed as your own, that you have bought them with a price, that you have redeemed them. He's like, these are your people. And then in verse 11, he says, O Lord, I pray, please let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who desire to fear your name. And let your servant prosper this day, I pray, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man, for I was the king's cupbearer. So this man, he's praying to have favor with the king, because we've talked about what's favor. What is the favor of God?
Right.
It's the stewardship of people, right? You're like, people give you favor, so you have to steward that. You have to handle that well, treat people well, because it's through people that you have favor, that you can increase, that you can have access to things that you wouldn't ordinarily have access to.
Exactly.
And so he immediately prays for the king and to have favor with the king. Now, what is the cupbearer? Like, we don't have that job title here in America, right? A cupbearer is similar to a butler. It is someone who was in close proximity with the king. They actually were a companion to the king. They would actually have some counsel with the king and be able to influence the king in a certain way if they were effective and if they were trusted. And usually the chief cupbearer was.
Yes.
And he was a tactful companion. And so
he was trustworthy.
Yeah, but he enjoyed the king's confidence. So part of his job was to serve the wine and to taste test it to make sure he wasn't being poisoned.
Make sure he wasn't poisoned, yes.
And so, like, it's a serious job. It's, you put your life at risk because kings were poisoned, and other people were trying to, take down this king.
And he was willing to take that risk.
He was willing.
Because he was a servant.
Right.
He was willing to be that servant.
But here's the thing. God placed him in that position.
Yes.
He had no idea. It's almost like Esther. He was there for such a time as this. He had no idea that he was going to be used, but he was a faithful cupbearer.
Yes.
And it's important that you know that, because in chapter 2, there's a key thing that happens here. And so in verse 1 it says, and it came to pass in the month of Nisan, 4 months later. So he's been fasting and praying and saying nothing for 4 months.
Staying silent.
And then it says, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, that I took the wine and gave it to the king. Now, I had never been sad in his presence before. Guys, if you didn't know this, you can never be sad before a king. It's actually executionable. Like, you die. Like, you execution immediately to be sad or angry in the king's presence. So here he is. His countenance has changed, and the king notices it. And he says, in verse 2, therefore the king said to me, why is your face sad, since you are not sick? This is nothing but sorrow of heart. So he knew, he discerned, there's something going on. You're sad about something in your heart.
Right.
So I became dreadfully afraid, because he could potentially die over this. And said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not be sad when the city, the place of my father's tombs, lies waste, and its gates are burnt with fire? Then the king said to me, what do you request? So I prayed. Again, he prayed before he spoke. I prayed to the God of heaven, and I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's tombs, that I may rebuild it. How bold is that?
Yes.
So I want to recap. He hears that the city's in disrepair. The people are in great distress. They're in reproach, which means that they're full of shame.
Yes.
They're vulnerable. They could be taken down, and we could lose this whole entire city. And he seeks after God, and he weeps, and he prays, and he fasts. And then he goes before the king, which he could be executed, just like Esther could have been executed to go into the king before, she had permission to. And so he goes and he asks the king boldly, but he prays before he speaks, so that God's words are filling his mouth. And then now
God
he reveals
would give him
the plan.
the wisdom and the
Yeah, we had no idea where he was going to go.
Right.
He didn't either. But now he's like, I want to rebuild the city. Now he's not we don't know if he's a carpenter. We don't know if he's capable, if he has those job skills, but because he was a cupbearer. That's his job. That was his position.
Yes.
So he prayed before he reacted. And that is something that we can take. Yes. So here, when you hear news, when someone tells you, oh, I have cancer. Oh, by the way, I'm going to have to let you go. We can't afford you anymore.
Right.
When you hear news like your kid is run away, or just devastating, oh, we're getting a divorce.
Yes.
What is your response? Your response is to fast and pray. Just sit down and take it in. Don't speak, but pray. Go to the Father and pray, and let him give you the course of action or the words to say. And then, so then it proceeds that the king in verse 6 says, and the queen was sitting right next to him, which means that the queen was helping him to be soft and tender. That's what that represents. And she said, how long will your journey be? And when will you return? So it pleased the king to send me, and I set a time. Furthermore, I said to the king, if it pleases the king. So now he's getting bolder.
Yep.
He's like, okay, you're going to let me go. That's awesome. So I have a sabbatical from my job. So I have job security. I can come back. But here, verse 7. If it pleases the king, let letters be given to me for the governors of the region beyond the river, that they must permit me to pass through till I come to Judah. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel, which pertain to the temple, for the city wall, and for the house that I will occupy. And the king granted them to me according to the good hand of my God upon me. That means according to the Holy Spirit that was resting in him, because he gave them the boldness to ask for that.
Yes.
So he's asking for passage. He's asking for time off. He's asking for the wood to not only build the city, but to build his own house that he's going to live in.
Right.
And guess what? The king did it.
Yep.
So whenever a king would write something, we talked about that when we talked about Esther. If the king decrees something, it is so, and you can't undo it. So he ends up in verse 11. Now he is going to see the wall. He finally arrives. Hey, Jessica. And let me just tell you, this is another great thing that he did. I'm going to read it. So I came to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. Then I arose in the night, I and a few men with me. I told no one what God had put in my heart to do at Jerusalem, nor was there any animal with me except the one that I rode on. So he's going quietly.
Right.
And he didn't tell anybody. How many times does God tell you something that you're supposed to do and you leak it? You tell other people. And then it doesn't come to pass.
Right.
Because you have people telling you, oh, you can't do that. Oh, you don't have the skills for that. You don't have the paper for that. You don't have, what
the money
it takes.
for that.
You don't have the money. And there's some things that you have to not share.
Yes.
You don't have to tell everything. You don't have to post it on Facebook. You don't have to tell anybody. If God tells you something, you store that inside and you pray on it. And then when he tells you to release it, then you can release it. But don't be premature in sharing what God has shared with you.
Right.
But that's what he did. So he told no one. Again, guys, we're in Nehemiah. In chapter 2, verse 13. And then I went out by night through the valley gate to the serpent wall and the refuse gate, and viewed the walls of Jerusalem, which were broken down, and to its gates where it was burned with fire. Verse 14, then I went to the fountain gate and the king's pool, but there was no room for the animal under me to pass. I mean, this place is in disrepair, this whole city. So I went up by night by the valley and viewed the wall, and then I came back and entered the valley gate, and so returned. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I had done, and I had not told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, or others who did the work. I mean, he's incognito, like he's spying it out.
Oh, yeah.
Then, verse 17, I said to them, so after he surveyed it, and I'm sure he's praying the entire time because he's a man of prayer.
Yes, and he wants God to guide every step. He wants this to be what God has called him to do. He seeks first.
It's important because he took off time from work. He works for the king. Right. He can't dilly-dally.
No.
He's got to do this right, and he's got to be effective, and he wants to be successful.
He does.
So these are keys that we can learn. These are things that we can apply to our life to be successful, to be a leader, to be a man of courage or a woman of courage. And so then in verse 17, then I said to them, you see the distress that we are in. He doesn't live there.
Once again.
But he is identifying with his people.
Yes.
That we are in, how Jerusalem lies waste and its gates are burned with fire. Come and let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer be a reproach. And again, reproach means shame. And and then he says, and then I told them of the hand of God which had been upon me, and also the king's words, and that he had spoken to me. So he's got God and his king backing him. And so they said, immediately, they said, let us rise up and build.
Yes.
Then they set their hands to do his good work. Like, they saw the call of God because they saw the integrity in his character. It spoke. Like, he just the way he carried himself, the way he came in. He was there 3 days. So, he was making relationships, rebuilding relationships of people that he hadn't seen in a while. They were having a good time, and they saw his character, and it spoke.
And they wanted on board. Like, they were
on
sign
board.
me up. I'll help you do whatever you need
that
to do.
in their mind, they're like, this speaks to me.
Yes.
God is speaking here, and they're like, yes. They saw that, and it was confirmed. It had to be in their own spirit.
Right.
And so I love that. I love that he prays first before he speaks. He's careful about the words that he chooses, and he inspired them. He inspired them. He went in there and shook it up.
Yep.
And so I started thinking, like, what thing can you do? What do you see that's in disrepair, that is in reproach in your city, in your town, in your home, in your church? What is there that you can do that it may not be in your job description,
right?
But it's something that is pulling at you. My pastor used to say, if you cry over something, that maybe what brings tears to you is what you're created to solve a problem for. Like, what is the burden? What is something in your city that drives you crazy? Like, you just can't stand. Is there trash all over the city?
Right.
Is something amiss? And you're like, someone needs to do something. Well, why not you?
That's the thing. Whenever we say, well, somebody needs to go do this or somebody needs to go do that, and maybe it's God saying, you're the one that I've called to do that. So step out in courage, step out in boldness, pray, and I will guide your steps.
Yeah. And see, the thing is, Nehemiah followed protocol. It's not like he was...
No, he was disciplined.
Rogue. He wasn't a rogue.
No.
He followed protocol.
Yes.
He followed God's law. God was his center. He cared more about what God thought, but he was a man under the law of the land as well, because he served the king so well that the king trusted him.
Right.
Like, that's unheard of. Like, the king not just going to be like, oh, you're sat in front of me and not kill you.
Right.
And then give you all of this stuff, all of these resources and time off from work so that you can go and rebuild another city that's not in your kingdom. It's unheard of, but it's because of his character, because of the years of service and being a great servant and being a man of honor and integrity. The king was able to see that in him and trust him to send him out there and and finance him.
Yep. And back him up completely.
Yeah. I mean, back him up in every aspect.
I mean, that was giving him authority, you know, to go do what he needed to do.
Yeah. And then he didn't, throw his authority everywhere. He went in there humbly. 3 days. He walked the streets. He talked to the people. And then he surveyed everything. And he was careful and meticulous. And because he wanted to make sure. There's a lot riding on this.
Right.
So, how can you do that? How can you repair situations in your town, in your life, in your world, like your sphere of influence? What are things that you can do to impact and change your community, your life, the lives of the people that are around you? The first thing that he does is he asks God for wisdom. But, ask God for wisdom. And maybe, we say be careful about who you share what God is telling you, but maybe there is a godly counsel in your life, a pastor, a really good friend that prays and seeks after God, and that you can line yourself up and partner with them and be like, will you help me pray this thing?
That will roll up their sleeves like they did and join them and be like, all right, I'm going to push you, you're going to push me, we're going to be there for each other, we're going to do this together, because they believe that much in you.
Right.
Just like they did in Nehemiah.
Yeah, I mean, they saw
because
and
your character, your character shows that you are who you say you are. Your heart is in the right path, and they're like, I'm gonna back you up, and we'll see. We'll see what God's gonna do through it.
And the Bible doesn't say this, but I pick this up, in other places the Bible says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Mm-hmm. I think he's that type of man.
He is.
Because he has to be. For the king to be able to do this for him, he has to be. But I have this highlighted and I want to read this here. It says, it's a note. I have a study Bible. So it's a note for verses 12 through 16 in chapter 2. As a wise leader, Nehemiah refrained from sharing his ideas with the people until he had accurately assessed matters and no doubt prayerfully considered the cost. Mm-hmm. Do you consider the cost when you're making decisions? Do you consider the cost when you jump in spontaneously? Like I'm spontaneous to an extent. I like to just go and do things, and I get the whole not planning out creative mindset. But I know that if on big decisions and even on little stuff, you have to count the cost. Mm-hmm. Can I pay that price to do that? What's it gonna take? How can I rally people? Like everyone has a sphere of influence. Mm-hmm. Who are you influencing, and how are you influencing them? Are you influencing them for the Lord? Are you influencing them for good? Are you doing the thing that God had called you to do? Like he's placed you where you are for such a time as this, no matter what you are, whether mm-hmm. you're a peasant orphan girl like Esther, right, or the butler to the king. Mm-hmm. You've been placed in your position for such a time as this, but that doesn't mean that defines who you are.
Right.
Esther went to become a queen. She was an orphan. Mm-hmm. Nehemiah was a cupbearer and became a great leader. There's all kinds of leadership books that are based off of the book of Nehemiah, because there's more. We just don't have the time right now to talk about it. This is just chapters 1 and 2. But
study it yourself. Read it, guys.
That was my thing.
Read the word.
Listen, Nehemiah is a short book. Mm-hmm. It's only, I think, 11 to 13 mm-hmm. 13 chapters, and some of the chapters are just a few verses, mm-hmm. but the story is beautiful, mm-hmm. because I will go ahead and do a spoiler alert. They build a city.
Yes, they do.
In a very short time period. Mm-hmm. and it is
because
awesome.
They're all working together.
And that's the whole point.
Every one of them.
He inspired them even through opposition.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He encouraged them. Just like Christ encourages us, mm-hmm. just like the Holy Spirit encourages us. He encouraged them to bear arms, to be strapped, armed and dangerous, like we're supposed to have our spiritual armor, mm-hmm. in Ephesians 5 it talks about, and be ready for warfare, but you don't stop, you keep working. You keep doing the thing that God has told you to do. So mm-hmm. they built the city, and he unified the people. Mm-hmm. Like no other. Like there is no other account of unity like this. This mm-hmm. is definitely, Mordecai and Esther, they definitely were unified, but he unified a large number of people where they worked side by side, mm-hmm. each family doing their one part.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, boom, the city was built. Mm-hmm. So everyone doing their little part. And that's the kingdom. That's what God
matters. Every person matters.
Every person matters. Yes. Everyone matters.
God has a plan for each of us.
And each one of us doing our thing builds the big kingdom.
And
it's
also
the big picture.
Teaming up and backing up other people, just like they did Nehemiah. That's so important, mm-hmm. because who you back matters.
Right.
What you put all your eggs in the basket for, it mm-hmm. matters.
Yeah, it really does. And so I just I encourage you today to think about what I asked you. Who are you influencing? Mm-hmm. What need is there in your city?
Yes.
There's so many areas to serve in. There's so many in our church. There's so many areas. We have covenant care. In our community we have Breaking Bread. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of other ministries. Salvation Army. There's mm-hmm. all kinds of ministries.
Hope to All, Christian Food Bank.
It's not just like if maybe you're not a Christian, or maybe you think, oh, I can't go into a church and I can't serve. There's something in your community. Mm-hmm. Talk to your mayor, talk to the city, talk to the Chamber of Commerce. What businesses need help? Or what can I do? How can I just go and clean up the city, all
Right.
the trash? What can I do?
I mean, and some of you guys have ideas that need to be expanded.
Right.
Like, you weren't just given that idea out of nowhere. You have to, we have to, it's got to be a walk it out thing. So if you have an idea, bring it to someone. So then that can be,
And
it
pray.
can grow.
Pray about
Pray
the
first.
person. What is she saying?
I want to go overseas on a mission so badly, but I haven't found the opportunity yet.
Yeah.
Girl, we were just talking about missions yesterday.
Yeah. I plan on going back to Guatemala. So if you need to just talk to me, but we went to Guatemala and we did an amazing work there. But there are so many opportunities in our own area. Wherever you live, there are places that you can make a difference, that you can impact, and to raise up our children that way.
Yes.
Not just for us to do it, but to teach our children and the next generation to be servants of the Lord. Like, what can we do? Can we go and maybe clean somebody's house? Can we go and help a single mother?
Or
Can
the
we
elderly.
Deliver groceries?
Yes.
Or small
There's
baskets.
so many elderly that can't get, there's shut-ins that can't get out and do anything. Every little part matters. Just like we said, every little bitty tiny thing matters.
Now, what Nehemiah did was huge. It was huge.
But it was those little bitty things that equal to it being huge.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And maybe you can visit assisted living homes and just sing songs or just play Scrabble or puzzles. I've done that before. They don't have a lot of people that visit them, but there's something that you can do that's not for yourself, that's for somebody else. There's a need that needs to be filled. Yeah, met. And you can do that.
Yes.
We can do that. All of us coming together. And so that's my call of action today. I want you to pray and ask God and think about when things come at you, when your mother says something, your father says something, someone's getting a divorce, someone's losing a job, whatever it is, sit down, pray about it, and ask God for wisdom.
Yes.
Whether it's just stuff coming at you or stuff that He's speaking to you to do. It's so important to get some wisdom from Nehemiah, and I encourage you to read the entire chapter slowly and just take it in. There's so much. If you look at my Bible, it is like written all over for Nehemiah and highlighted, because there's so much good stuff in here that is applicable to us today.
And also, I think that you guys need to be encouraged to believe in yourselves. That whatever that idea is, whatever that you feel that God's calling you to do, to just remove fear from your mind. Pray that fear would be removed from your mind, so then you can step out and be who God has created you to be.
Yes.
To do what He's called you to do. Because, we think all the time that it takes a lot of people to change the world. It only takes one person to change the world, and that one person could be you, because you change the world.
You change your
that
world.
You are
The people that you influence, that you work with.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
so
your world.
That's so important that we get that mindset that every little bitty thing that we do adds up to something great and huge. Just like Nehemiah. Every little bitty thing matters. And you matter.
And I think about this a lot. I mean, I already knew what I was going to speak about, but I was thinking about, we went to a funeral yesterday, and it was a mighty woman of God, a woman of prayer, a woman of influence in her own way, and she impacted so many people. And here at Covenant, unfortunately, we have a lot of funerals. So I've been to a lot of funerals. I had never been to funerals. Really, I had a handful till I moved here, and now it's just part of it. We had a funeral 2 weeks ago, and when I hear the stories of people's lives and how they were impacted by the person that we're celebrating, it just blows me away. And I'm like, okay, so it reminds me I have to make sure that I do what God has called me to do.
Yes.
Because at the end of my life, I want to be able to say, I did it all, I laid it down, I gave it all, and well good and faithful
yes,
servant.
Yes, well done. Yes.
Well done, good
So
and
you can
faithful
enter
servant.
in.
So that I can hear those words. But it's just, it's pretty amazing.
It is. And to think, of what legacy do you want to leave?
Right.
I mean, it's just...
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's beautiful. It really
yeah.
is beautiful to go to funerals and stuff and to see the impact that people really have on.
Yeah. And she
on
left
others.
a legacy.
Yes.
Like,
it
she
was
left
beautiful.
an amazing legacy.
It was absolutely beautiful. The message
it was
was
amazing.
beautiful.
Like,
everything.
I went
I
home
left
telling
inspired.
my husband, yes,
Me too. I left
I
inspired.
did.
I'm sitting here and I'm like, I have like all these things going on in my mind. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, God, what are you trying to tell me through this? What are you trying to say?
And even just the simple thing of not that she built a wall,
Right.
not that she united all these people to do this great thing, but it's the impact that she had on individual lives, a little encouragement here,
and
a
that's
laughter
what
here.
matters.
Yeah. And then how she felt for her children and her grandchildren. And it is amazing, and that should inspire us. And so Nehemiah should inspire us, the saints that have gone on to be with the Lord.
Yes.
They should empower us to move forward and trust in God, because if he gives it to us, he is going to complete it. He is going to be faithful. So if you guys have any prayer requests, if you have any questions, let us know. We hope that you'll go ahead and read all of Nehemiah, or at least today, read chapters 1 and 2. Chapters 1 is only 11 verses, and chapter 2 is only 20 verses. But if you could just soak that in, and maybe every day read a chapter and study Nehemiah, and how you can take some of the principles and some of the characteristics of his personality and apply it to your life, to be radically changed and transformed, to do what God has called you to do, and to fulfill the purpose and the plan that he has for you.
And also, we look forward to hearing for what God's going to do
Yes,
through that.
please.
From what Nehemiah spoke, what God spoke to you through Nehemiah, so then you can go forth and do what you're called to do. I mean, we're here cheering you on. We're saying go for it. Be bold. Be brave today.
Yes.
No fear in Jesus' name. You guys are going to rise up and do what God has called you guys to do.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you for joining us today. We hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great weekend coming up. And we look forward to speaking to you again next Thursday at 9 o'clock. So hit that little arrow and spread this message. And thank you for joining us again. If you've just come on, please go back. We were talking about Nehemiah, chapters 1 and 2. Watch the replay. And send this to someone that might need to be encouraged, that maybe has something that we've been talking about that's going to pull it out of them. And so thank you so much for joining us again, and see you next time.